Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by my co-host, Dayton Reimer. To this episode, we're a duo. Peter is away for this week, but Dayton, how's it going?
Oh, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's winding down hockey seasons, so playoffs are coming. It's always exciting. Lots of stuff to do with the Blades. Draft profiles. Like this is my favorite part of the hockey season, so it's always good.
Yes, we got the draft in a few months here. We're pumping out the prospect profiles of the Hockey Writers here already. I think we're closing in on 20 coming up here, so that's a good start. So make sure checking out all that. If you're subscribed to the Substack, you'll get updates almost every day as the prospect profiles come out, so you can keep track that way. Or you can just keep checking the website. We got 2 or 3 out every day. So make sure checking that out. Today we're going to put the draft aside and talk about some current prospects. Not saying that they're not prospects, but NHL prospects drafted guys and talk about some of the players that are having really good seasons and highlight them. I'm sure if you're following the teams that we're going to talk about, you've probably heard their names or seen them on your timelines on any of the social media because they've been pretty good. So we're going to start. We're going to do the Canadian teams because we always love. Obviously, I've covered the Vancouver Canucks. Dayton covers the Ottawa Senators. As you can see, the jerseys in our backgrounds here. So we're going to start out east, and we'll start with the Montreal Canadiens, the furthest east team, and talk about a few of their players that are having some standout seasons. So I'll start with you, Dayton. Who do you want to highlight from their prospect pool? Because it's actually a really impressive one. And I mean, the team is almost in the playoffs here, and they've got some really good prospects still coming.
Yeah, I think the obvious choice would be Ivan Demidov as their top performer this year. He's been excellent in the KHL. Got 49 points in 64 games. That is one of the best performances from somebody who is 19 years old. And there's even a chance he could be coming over in the near future. I saw a headline. I didn't click on the article, so I don't know how reliable this is, but he may have been scratched in his most recent game. Maybe that's leading towards an appearance in North America for signing a contract. Really tough to say. Sometimes you just get scratched in the KHL, it seems. But yeah, no, he's been absolutely fantastic.
For sure. Yeah, Demidov, I know Blaine Potvin, who covers the Canadiens here for the Hockey Writers. He had an article out and it wasn't specifically about Demidov, but he did mention that he could be coming over when his KHL season ends. So that's a good report there. So he could be coming. And Canadiens, I don't know, if they make the playoffs, he could find Demidov playing in his first playoff game too. We'll see. That's going to be something to follow because he's been having a really good season. Like you said, 19 goals. He's really good in the KHL. And it's a professional league. He's probably not getting a ton of ice time because KHL, I mean, they're not really good for young players, but I mean, it seems like he's getting enough that he can produce. And that's pretty good totals. 49 points, 50, a little under a point a game, 0.77 points per game, but really good for how young he is. I want to mention another guy here, Tyler Thorpe, who plays for the Vancouver Giants. He's having a really good season. He's got 27 goals and 51 points in 66 games so far, and he's drafted in 2024. So that's really good for a guy that's, I believe he's got a career high this season now. He's got already 27 goals. He only had 23 in 51 games last season. He's got 27 in 66. I mean, the season's almost over, so he's on pace for another goal if he can score in the next couple games here. So, I mean, that's a really good production for a guy that was drafted in the 5th round by the Canadiens. So maybe a little bit of an underrated prospect, not a high-end guy that was drafted in the first couple rounds that a lot of their prospects do have. But he's having a really good season. He's actually, anyone in the system, he's got the most points. So that's another guy I wanted to mention. He's having a really good season too.
Yeah. And then I think we got to mention Jacob Fowler as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Is he having a season? Like, he's got a 940 save percentage with 33 games under his belt. He's only lost 6 games in regulation, a 164 goals against average, 7 shutouts. Like that. Has that been done before? I'm, of course, not as up to my NCAA history as I am, let's say, the WHL. But, right, he's 3rd in save percentage right now in the NCAA. He's, I believe, he's 2nd in shutouts. Yeah, like, that is just an amazing performance from a goalie. So he's going to, like, could you give him the crown as the next Carey Price?
Right now, I think he's probably the closest to what, a lot of for their goaltenders. I mean, doing that in the NCAA, and he's still quite. He hasn't. This is his 2nd season, right? So, I mean, what can he do in the next couple? And he's already this good. If he does do his full 4 years, I'm sure. I mean, the thing is, the Canadians do have Jakub Dobish. He can fill in right now. I don't think they really need him to rush him into the NHL. He can probably play out his NCAA career, and and come over after that. They don't technically really need him right now. So, I mean, and goalies take a bit of time to develop. I don't know if you'll be able to step in. Like Carey Price stepped in at 19 years old. So, yeah, and he was really good off the bat. And there was actually debate that maybe they shouldn't have put him in that early, and then gave him the starting job when they traded Cristobal Huet, I believe, at the time, and gave him the starting reins really early. I think that really hurt his. I don't know if it hurt his development, because what he did, but I don't think they should rush Fowler, because I think they have enough goalies to do it without him right now.
He actually, Carey was 20.
20, yeah.
Yeah. So his rookie season was 07-08. And like, he just, maybe you could have waited a little bit longer. I think goalies, you never want to push too quickly, but giving him those reps, let him get confident. Carey Price, it worked out well. They just didn't have quite the team around him to make that playoff push turn into a success. But maybe you leave Fowler in the NCAA for a couple of more seasons, and he just continues to dominate, and then he arrives in the NHL, and he is their starter at 22.
Mm-hmm. And then probably for quite a long time after that, too.
You'd hope so, yeah.
You'd hope so. And, I mean, Carey Price, he had to deal with the injuries and stuff. Hopefully nothing happens with Fowler in that case, but goalies is a tough position. Yeah. I mean, to have longevity, I'm really surprised at how long Marc-Andre Fleury's been in the league and not had to deal with really bad injuries. And, I mean, some goalies can sustain and play a long time, but a lot of the time it's injuries that force goalies into retirement, unfortunately. It's a very tough position on the body for sure. Mm-hmm. All right, let's move to your team, Dayton, and go to the Ottawa Senators. And I mean, if you followed Dayton's Prospect of the Week column for every week, obviously, probably some of these players, but Dayton, remind us, who are the top performers for the Senators this season?
So I think the obvious, not the obvious answer, the most expected answer is Carter Yakimchuk. He's been having a very solid season with the Calgary Hitmen. He hasn't had the points that I expected him to have. Like, he was a 70-point defenseman last year, and he's only on pace to hit 52 this season. Won't hit 30 goals this season, but his defensive game has rounded out. That is a big thing that we've seen, And that was a big criticism of his game last year, right? He wasn't playing maybe as smartly as he could be. He was really focusing on the offense. And with the Calgary Hitmen at that time, he needed to. He was their best offensive player. This season, he doesn't have to be that anymore. Ben Kindle has really broken out. They've added Tanner Howe. They've got Oliver Tulk. It's a really solid team. So he's been able to play a bit more of that big, mean shutdown guy while also being a really smart offensive player. And so he's been really, really good. But one guy I think who's eclipsed him this year, at least as like an MVP, is Blake Montgomery. The kid has been unreal since coming over from the USHL to the London Knights. 23 goals and 50 points in 50 games, which like he just cannot be stopped. There have been, speaking of the prospect of the weeks, 2 weeks where he's put up 8 points in 3 or 4 games. Like he's just found his perfect niche in this league. He's another big kid, pretty strong skater. Yeah, not a lot of things that he can do wrong, and just really, really high offensively driven. Those two guys have been fantastic. Of course, Levi Marilainen, he's been excellent with his NHL success. He's been really good. Also in the AHL, he's been very, very solid as well. The Belleville Senators aren't as strong of a team. They're still kind of trying to snag that last playoff spot, but he's still been probably their most consistent goalie down there. Malcolm Subban has actually been really good too. He might be a guy to keep an eye on for the future. But those are probably my top 3 guys. There's more that have had some really good moments of success, but those are my top 3.
Yeah, those guys have been on your prospect of the week quite a few times. I know Yakimchuk's been multiple. I'm sure you're going to do an award at the end of the season. Who's been taking home the most?
Oh, I was planning on it. Yeah.
I'll keep an eye out for that. I want to mention Thomas Samara. 53 points, 56 games this season. He's got his highest point total before that, 17. Kitchener Rangers and the Brantford Bulldogs. I mean, not full seasons for those two, but he's got 45 assists this season, which obviously is a career high because he hasn't hit more than 16 in a season before that. But I mean, looks like a pretty good defensive prospect. I mean, he was drafted in 2022, quite a while ago now. And he's been a standout on any of the Czechia teams that he's been in the World Juniors. Has had some really good outings there. And I mean, this season, that's a good total for defenseman that hasn't really put up a lot of points before that. Maybe he's discovered something. He is older now, so he's one of the overage type guys, which maybe you pull back and say, well, maybe that's why. But still, I mean, that's a really good amount of points for a guy that's not really known for that.
Mm-hmm. No, he's been very good to follow. I think it's just sort of he's finally in a place where he's comfortable. There is maybe a part of him that is a bit of a late bloomer, or he's an older guy, so he is getting more of the ice time. You know, those kind of offensive outbursts are going to happen. But without that, like we've seen him do really well internationally, just not in North America. But this season, it's kind of just clicking together. So hopefully that translates to a success in the pros.
Yeah, he should be in the AHL probably next season, right? So we'll see how he does next season. All right, let's move to the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's an obvious top performer here, and that is Easton Cowan, obviously. One of the top guys that, we've talked about, and Peter's talked about him many times on this show. He's, breaking records left and right with the London Knights. He's got 29 goals, 68 points in 45 games. It's not ridiculous like some of the other guys. I mean, they've been putting up ridiculous numbers. But that streak that he had it's still going on, is it? It was broken.
I'm not sure.
It was broken. But he's gone on another streak since then. So it's like breaks and then he's starting one again. But it'll take a while for him to get back to it. But he's got quite a few points in the last bunch of games. And he is one of their top guys. And I mean, he's not going to hit the same point total he had last season with 96 points in 54 games. He's on pace for only 71 because the season's almost over. He hasn't played as many games either. So, I mean, still really impressive season for Easton Cowan. Probably will be in the NHL potentially next season. He's still got some eligibility left in the OHL. We'll see if he returns. Dayton, you have anyone else? I know there's one guy that they just signed to an ELC that is having a really good season, but who else do you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, the guy you're mentioning is Boreavalis from the Prince George Cougars. He's been on fire lately. 80 points in 64 games, 34 goals. Yeah, just a big undrafted forward who kind of found his game a little bit later. Didn't help that he was kind of on the tail end of the Bedard era with the Regina Pats. So the whole team sort of took a bit of a dip after that. And once he came into Prince George, he was a point per game player. And he was always just a little bit under that in Regina. And so it was really, really exciting for him to see him get a NHL contract. I think that's awesome. I quite like Sam McHugh. He's been really good this season, playing with the Flint Firebirds. After the trade deadline, he was with Owen Sound before that. Yeah, just a really hardworking player. Very, kind of, he's aggressive. He gets after the puck. Good two-way instincts. Yeah, he's a solid player. I also like his brother Max. The McHugh brothers have been really fun to follow. And Max is now playing pro. They're good kids.
Yeah, he's the guy that's kind of maybe flown under the radar. I haven't really seen a lot of written stuff on it. Maybe Peter, you got to be writing about this guy. Unless I missed it. Sorry, Peter, if I did. But yeah, it's Cowan's had the most ink spilled on him, and Boreavalis, of course, too, because it's been pretty recent that he signed that contract. They did trade Nikita Gorbenkin at the trade deadline, so he's no longer. He's had a pretty good first pro season, but no longer Maple Leafs prospect. But yeah, they've had a couple good guys. Of course, they also traded Fraser Minton. So I mean, they've taken two of the guys that really talked about lately. But
yeah, and they don't have a lot of guys left. It's a weaker prospect pool in the NHL. I think the Athletic had them 29th back in January. Roni Hirvonen and Topi Niemela, those guys are still worth keeping an eye on, but they've kind of fallen off a little bit. Ben Danford, he's been fine, but I don't know if you could say incredible. I like Noah Chadwick, but he's going to be a depth guy if he makes the NHL. Just a solid defenseman with the Lethbridge Hurricanes. Yeah, there's a lot of guys who might be something, but after Easton Cowan, it's a lot of question marks.
And even more so now that they've made a couple trades, digging into that prospect pool. So but they're in win now mode. So that's how it is for teams that are in that position. So they just have to build that up. Not with high draft picks, because they make the playoffs in good positions every year. So they just have to deal with what they got and see if they can get some gems in the later rounds.
Yeah. I mean, it works for Vegas.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Vegas, of course, traded the player that we talked about.
I am excited to get to that prospect pool because there's got to be like 4 names to discuss, and that's it.
Yeah, it won't be very long. It won't take very long to talk about them for sure. There is one, though, the Winnipeg Jets. Their prospect pool is bursting with a lot of guys that have had great seasons. So there's quite a few to talk about here. I think I wrote down 4 guys, but there's a few others. So I'll let you get started. Who do you want to talk about? Pretty great prospect pool for a team that's the top of the league right now.
Man, yeah. That's how often do you see that? I don't know. I think you got to go with Kieran Walton as kind of their MVP prospect this season. Big 6'6" kid. He was a 6th rounder last season. He is almost 100-point player in the OHL this season. He's got 38 goals, 91 points, could very well hit 40 goals by the end of the season, which is coming up very quickly in Ontario. I really love seeing these big guys who can do more than just be big, right? He's a great kind of playmaker. He's able to use his hands really, really well. When we get to Calgary, there's another big guy that I'm going to talk about who's been really impressive. Maybe not an MVP, but still really good. Mm-hmm. Just smart. He can move well. But he's also strong. You can't really knock him down once he's got the puck. So there's a few other guys. Braden Yeager is another one who's been very good. I think he would fall second to me just because I've watched the Hurricanes a couple of times this season, and he never jumps out for whatever reason. I don't know if I'm just missing him those games or what, but I keep watching for him to do something and he doesn't. So do something. I mean, he's got 51 points in 32 games. It's not like he's not doing anything. It's just when I'm there, it doesn't seem like he is.
He disappears. I
don't know. Just when I'm showing up. Doesn't like me.
Right. Like, I mean, he's had a great season, got 81 points over the two teams he's played for this season. So, and he was the one that they got in McGroarty trade. So, that's, looks like both sides are doing pretty well in that one. McGroarty's having a pretty good, had a little bit of a slow start in the AHL, but seems to be kind of finding his feet now. Yeager between the two, I don't know, they're both having pretty good. I think it's pretty good 1-for-1 swap, right? Mm-hmm. So Kevin He, another guy, has had a great season, 74 points. Another later round draft pick. It seems like they're hitting on a few of these guys. Obviously we won't know for sure until they actually hit in the NHL, but 4th round pick, 109th overall. It's always great seeing guys that are Canadian and Chinese. They don't have not a lot of Chinese players in the NHL. I don't think there is any actually right now.
No, I don't believe we've seen a Chinese-born player make the NHL yet. We've seen a Japanese player,
right?
Yutaka Fukufuji, that was a while ago now, 2008 or something like that. I think he was the first Japanese-born player to play, but we haven't seen a Chinese-born player make the NHL yet. So he could be the first. That would be really cool.
Yeah, and he's got a good chance of it.
Very good.
Back-to-back 30-goal seasons now in the OHL with the Niagara Ice Dogs. He's the captain of the team too, so a leadership ability as well. Career high 74 points and also career high in goals 35. Again, the season's almost over, so doesn't have a lot of time to increase on that, but really good season for him and one of the top guys. He's also, plus minus, can't really say, but he's a +2 after being -13 last season, so maybe a bit better defensively too. Yeah. So, really good season for him. Those are the 3 guys that I really had on my list here. Colby Barlow, I mentioned him. Another guy with a lot of leadership ability and could be a really good second line guy. And he's been pretty good, 257 points. It's not off the charts great, but he's been another guy that I think is going to be a really good NHL player too. Mm-hmm. All right, moving on, and we'll go to the Calgary Flames now. You mentioned them. Who do you want to talk about? They have had quite a few players too that have had great seasons.
Yeah, the Flames' top prospect right now is Zane Parekh. There's no question. He's a 100-point defenseman with the Saginaw Spirit. And of course, I saw a couple of things posted about like, oh, the Carter Yakimchuk went 7th, and Perek went after him. Look at what you got. It's like they're very different players. Yakimchuk is always going to be a more physical guy. He likes to play that aggressive in your face game, and Perek is a pure like silky puck mover. He's got just unbelievable movement. I saw some things last year that gave me some hesitation. They don't seem to be there anymore. He is an unreal player, just a fantastic puck mover. Imagine putting him alongside Hunter Brzustewicz. Just two guys who know how to get that puck going. I don't think you'll ever see it if you're the other team.
Yeah.
But one guy who has really stood out to me this year is on the Saskatoon Blades, Hunter Lang. They acquired him in the January trade deadline. So he's a big guy. I think he is, let me pull up the actual height here before I get it wrong. Will it load? Yep. Okay, he's also 6'6" on Elite Prospects. And he wasn't really an offensive player. You know, he was fine, but he wasn't blowing the scoring charts away while he was in Prince George. Now in Saskatoon, he has become one of their top goal scorers. He is able to read the plays really, really well and put himself into the perfect tipping zone. And once he's in front of the net, you can't move him because he does have that strength and that skill. And one of the prettiest goals I've seen this season in Saskatoon was he was just there, sitting in the middle, and he was able to direct the puck just so perfectly right into the top corner of the net. I've never seen somebody aim a deflection that precisely. Like he clearly knew exactly where he wanted to put it, and he just did it. He's got 23 points in 25 games with the Blades, 45 on the season. But, you know, he's going to be in Saskatoon next year, almost definitely. He's only 18, 6th-round pick of the Flames last year. Yeah, he might be somebody as like a dark horse to become, you know, for example, a Hunter Brzustewicz who kind of came out of nowhere to take the OHL by storm last season. So I'd be interested to see what he can do with the Blades next year.
Yeah, I would say don't remind me of Hunter Brzustewicz.
I'm sorry, I had to. He's there.
Yes, and it's worse now because the Canucks do not have the guy they traded him for. Elias Lindholm is not with the Canucks right now. But yeah, it's he's had a good season in the AHL. Not, of course, the point totals he was putting up in the OHL. I mean, but looks like he's going to could potentially be an NHL player. So another guy I'll mention is Luke Misa, brother of Michael Misa. It's at 34 goals and 82 points in 65 games right now. Just eclipsed his high from last season. So point better and a lot more goals. He only had 26 goals, and now he's got 34 this season. Not as highly touted of a prospect as, of course, Michael is. He's going to potentially could be the first overall pick. Who knows? We'll see. But drafted fifth round, 150th overall by the Flames in 2024. A little smaller player, 5'10", but very quick, very, probably fit for the NHL right now in speed, and he's one of the faster players in the OHL. So we'll see what he does. I mean, he's already kind of going on to. He's an older guy too. He's 19, so he does have maybe a couple seasons left in junior, and we'll see if he can continue, upping his totals, because it looks like he's on that track. And I know when he's played his brother a few times, and there's definitely a talent difference in the two for sure. But he's had a good season, and we'll see if he can become an NHL player too. All right, moving on to a team that does not have a lot of guys. I was kind of grasping to see what guys. Edmonton Oilers. They have a couple players that have had some good seasons, but I'll let you go first, Dayton, so you can maybe take one of them, because I know you'll probably take one of them.
I mean, one of my favorites this year has been Bo Akey, a defenseman who was on Team Canada. I thought we've talked a lot about Team Canada and how they for the most part underwhelmed. There were a few good performances, and I thought Aki looked really good. He was somebody I hadn't really considered as one of Canada's top defensemen, but he looked like he deserved to be there. I thought he looked really strong. He's a good skater. He's aggressive on the puck. He's aggressive on breaking up the play. Really good with his stick. He can separate an attacker from the puck with just flick of his wrist. He's got some good speed. He's got some good strength as well. He's a really well-rounded defenseman, and I really liked what I've seen so far from him this season. Matthew Savoy, he's another guy who's been quite good and probably takes the reins as Edmonton's top prospect. He's got 41 points in 51 games with the Bakersfield Condors. He does not lead the team, though, unfortunately. He's behind. Who is he behind here? Drake Kajula. Hopefully I said that right. And Seth Griffith. They both have outscored him in the points. Kajula has more goals than him as well. Actually, they both do. But he's much closer to Griffith. Those guys are veterans, so it does make sense why they would be a bit better in the AHL. It's a surprisingly tough league. You don't see a lot of guys scoring a whole bunch. So 41 points, 51 games, that's pretty solid. You don't discount that just because it's not a point per game.
Yeah.
And I think he is well on his way to making a spot with the Oilers. He's already played 4 games this season. We've talked about him in the past. He's got some great speed. He's a really, really smart offensive player. He just needs that opportunity. And unfortunately with the Oilers, I don't know when that opportunity is going to come.
Yeah. And he has had some, like you said, the 4 games in the NHL, and he's played with, Draisaitl and looked pretty good with them. I mean, very small sample size. I think he only played a couple games with them on his line. And we all know how good Draisaitl's been in this season. If they can become a bit of a duo, I think that's really good for the Oilers. They don't have a lot of guys coming up that could potentially play with a guy like that. So, I mean, Savoy has the skill that could potentially be a fit. But yeah, I didn't like the talk that they might trade him at the deadline. I'm like, don't trade your best prospect. So I'm glad they didn't do that, because I think he does have a future with the Oilers as a player, and trading him now when you just acquired him not that long ago is probably not a good idea. Yeah. And they didn't make that decision. So that's a good thing.
That is good. Yes.
For him and for the Oilers too. I'll mention Sam O'Reilly. I mentioned him quite a few times too whenever we talk about the Oilers prospects. He was a first-round pick this past draft as well, 32nd overall. When it looked like the Oilers weren't going to have a pick in the round, they got one and then drafted O'Reilly, who has a career high this season, hit that 28 goals. He had 20 last season. Also has more points as well, so he's progressing. A bit of similar. What's funny how O'Reilly, he's similar to Ryan O'Reilly in his style too. He's a good defensive center, physical, smart. Could potentially, I don't want to say Selke Trophy, but that type of player.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe that last name just conducive to good defensive centers. Maybe. They're not related, just to say. But they do have similar styles of play, and if he can become a guy even half Ryan O'Reilly, I think the Oilers would be okay with that, because he's a really good. He's become a really good NHL player. So, but yeah, he's had a good season. I don't know if he's going to ever become a really big point producer in the NHL, but we'll see. And he's with a really good organization with the London Knights. So. Get some good education hockey-wise. And he's plus 53. Like I say, plus minus, but plus 53 I think is a pretty good stat.
Yeah, you definitely want to take note of when it's something like that.
Yeah, so he's good defensively. The London Knights also score quite a bit. but he's just not on the ice when the goals are scored against him, which is good. So O'Reilly, another top performer for the Oilers prospect pool for sure.
Yeah.
All right, finishing off with my team, the Vancouver Canucks, and there are quite a few guys, not a lot in the junior leagues, but quite a few in the AHL. I will mention, so I don't take everyone from you, Dayton. I'm going to start with Danila Klimovich because I think, is their top performer. Jonathan Lekromacki would be too, but he's playing most of his games in the NHL lately. But Klimovich has had a ridiculous season for what he did last season. I mentioned him on Prospect of the Week. I believe it was last week. Only was in single digits last season, was injury, had a lot of injuries, healthy scratches. But this season, he has got a career high in goals. He just hit his 20 goal mark for the first time in the AHL. He's got 21 goals now, and just continues to be a confident player in the AHL, which kind of been up and down over his career. It came in really early after being drafted and kind of struggled. More of an offensive player. His defensive game is still in progress, but I think he's kind of figured it out offensively. He's got the trust of the head coach, Manny Malhotra, now in Abbotsford, and I think that's really doing him well because he's playing in the top six, first unit power play, and he's scoring goals. He's got a ridiculous shot. His nickname's the Klim Reaper, which is
that's great.
It's great. I love it. I don't know who came up with it, but great nickname. And his shot is lethal. I mean, he can pick corners, and he's a very creative player. So if he can translate that to the NHL, that's a second round pick that a lot of fans look back on right now, and they're not sure because the guy that they could have picked was Logan Stankoven, and we all know what he's doing in the NHL now. Yeah. Maybe quelling those concerns a bit, but I don't think it will for sure until Klimovich actually is doing something in the NHL, and he hasn't had his debut yet. But if he continues on this track, I think he might not get that this season because the Canucks just aren't in a position to. I mean, they've got Lekromacki in the lineup, but he's a little bit further along. So I don't know if he's going to get his debut this season, but he's on his way, and I'm happy because he's an exciting player. I'm glad he's having a good season. Dayton, I'll let you go, and then I'll mention a few other mine.
Okay. I will try not to take too many of yours then. I think it's hard to not talk about Jonathan Lekromacki as the Canucks' top prospect. You mentioned him briefly here, but 28 points in 32 games, 19 goals with the Abbotsford Canucks. He has been in the NHL for 17 games so far, 2 goals, 4 points. That's pretty solid for a 20-year-old rookie. He's got a -7, talking about plus minus. So, it's something, but nothing to be too worried about. He looks like he is adjusting well in the NHL, and I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Yeah.
And then also another one of their top picks, Tom Willander, is doing quite well with Boston University right now. 22 points in 34 games as a defenseman. He had 5 points in 7 games with Sweden's World Junior team. This is his sophomore campaign, and I think the NCAA just wrapped up here recently, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully Boston will be able to make a few things happen in the postseason playoffs. I'm really unfamiliar with the NCAA and how things work. The Frozen Four happens sometime, and then there's a bunch of teams that I don't know how they qualify. There's too many teams in the NCAA, and it confuses me. Give me 22 teams. I can handle that.
They got a lot of those. Like they just had the Bean Pot not that long ago, and that's a tournament that's done with the Boston teams. So I mean, then they've got the national championship. They got these different other things that go on. So yeah, it's a little difficult to follow. But Willander's had a good season. One of their top ice time. I mean, he's a workhorse on the back end. Now that of course, now that Lane Hudson isn't there, he is their top defenseman.
His brother's there, though.
But his brother's there, too. But, I mean, they're both of them. I believe he's actually paired with them. So, and he was paired with his brother, too. So, it's funny.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of Hudsons.
Yeah. Just swapped partners, got Cole this season. So, I mean, very good partner. Some practice to what everyone's hoping will be his partner in the future, Quinn Hughes. So, that's some good practice for him. But yeah, he's had a good season. Riley Patterson, a bit of maybe an under the radar prospect for the Canucks. I mean, was drafted in the 4th round in 2024. He's got 25 goals and not up to his career high. He had 29 last season. Slowed down a bit. He was on fire for a while there. Kind of gone cold a little in the last 10 games, but still 59 points in 63 games. So having a pretty decent season again, not many games left, so he probably won't hit his career high or match it or even eclipse it, but he's had a good season too. Another guy, Anthony Romani, had a ridiculous season last season, but he broke his clavicle very early on, which kind of derailed it a bit. But since he's come back, he's had a really productive. He's actually just continued where he left off, really. Getting a ton of points. He was traded early around the trade deadline for the OHL to the Barrie Colts, which is where Riley Patterson is playing too. So, I mean, he's had a really good since he's returned from injury, so that's good. Looks like the injury didn't derail his development, but he was an overage prospect this past draft too. But yeah, a really good season coming back from injury. So, I mean, the Canucks have actually had quite a few prospects that have had some good seasons. Sora Minio would be another one that's had a good season. Atu Ratu in the AHL. So hopefully, I think with Ratu, the Canucks are hoping that he's going to become a centerman that can replace. And now they traded JT Miller, not replace him, but come up and actually be a productive middle 6, hopefully maybe top 6 guy. Hasn't been recalled in a while because they've brought in, of course, like Kermack and all their trade deadline acquisitions. And Oman has come up again, and he's playing regular minutes too. So, but Ratu's had a really good season in the AHL, and looks like on the right path for his development. So, a few good seasons for the Canucks prospects. And Lekremaki, I agree. I think he's adjusted to the NHL quite well. He's on the power play. I don't think they're using him right on the power play, though. I'll just say that. Whenever he's on the power play, he's not being used where he is in the AHL, where he scored a lot of power play goals from his, and of course the World Juniors, they set him up in the same spot, and that's his one-time spot on the left face-off dot there, or the hash marks, I believe it is. And he's sure got a great wrist shot, one-timer. They just don't use him in the NHL in that position. Which is kind of interesting to me because he's done it so many other places and they're not using him in the right spot. But hopefully that they remedy that. They're using him right in the AHL because he's got so many goals from that spot. So, but yeah, he's on the right track. He almost had his 3rd goal of the season yesterday as we're recording this, but Hellebuck made a ridiculous save. So he couldn't get his 3rd goal. But yeah, Lekremaki's on the right track, though. We'll see what he does next season. I hope that he becomes a 30-goal scorer. I think he has got the shot for it, and we'll see if he can do that soon. But he's very young, so we'll wait on that. All right, that is the Canadian teams. We will continue our series next week and talk about a few other guys. I don't know how I'm going to format this, but we'll talk about another like 5 or 6 teams next week. But thanks, Dayton, for coming on, talking these very high-performing prospects, all having great seasons, and all of them confirming why they were drafted in the first place or signed depending. I think all the guys we talked about were drafted prospects, but lots of great performances from a lot of guys. So stay tuned next week. We'll keep talking about them. If you want us to talk about any prospect, leave it in the comments and we will touch on it for sure. But make sure to check out everything at thehogbears.com. Of course, we've got the draft coverage going, and we'll keep talking about the draft as weeks go here too. We'll do our regular shows that we usually do every year. But until our next episode, we will see you next time.